Hello, everyone, and welcome to Overexposed, the BWRM run podcast where we talk all things real estate photography, business marketing. Joining us today is our CEO, the founder of BWRM, Guy LePage. Hello, Guy.
G'day. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Guy, let's jump straight in because we've only got a short amount of time before your kids get home from school. How did you get into this? Because you weren't always a real estate photographer, were you?
No, I'm an electrician, but I'd like to keep that secret so I don't have to do too much electrical work for my friends. Yeah, so I basically, electrician straight out of school, always did arts through school and then travelled. And for the first time, probably after 6 years of having left school, I picked up a camera and my wife and I, Mel, backpacked for 2 years and I took photos every day. And probably 3 months out from getting home, I realised that I didn't want to stop. So I looked for opportunities to continue doing photography and found myself in a franchise, having never run a business. I thought that might be a good place for me to start.
So was the attraction for you about taking photos, or was it about running a business, or was it a bit of both?
It was both. So I really wanted to run a business and I really didn't want to give up taking photos. So I tried to. I knew I didn't really know much about either, to be honest. I think I had a decent eye, but that was it. And no business acumen, no business experience, nothing.
And where were you based at that point?
Well, we had moved. So we travelled and I'd done my apprenticeship in this town that I sort of grew up in, which is where I met my wife. And we moved to the town that she grew up in. So we were in Bowen Heads in Victoria, which anyone's seen Sea Change, which both of you guys, having not grown up in Australia, probably haven't. But if anyone has, they'll know Bowen Heads very well.
Okay, cool. So you started a real estate photography business from scratch. Was there much competition? Was it hard to get going?
When I started, there wasn't a lot of competition. There was a little bit, but it felt like the industry was in its infancy back then. What I did, though, is I started in Bowen Heads and then I decided that I'd actually push into Melbourne. So I ended up in the western suburbs of Melbourne building a business there because I just went for where the population was the biggest and where I thought the market was the strongest. And I realised really quickly that I'm a country boy, surprise, surprise, and I didn't like the city at all, or I didn't like working in there. So I then pivoted and I went, rather than driving an hour and a half, 2 hours from home towards the city, I decided to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours from home away from the city, which was a drive that I really loved, through a rainforest and out to a coastal town called Apollo Bay, which was pretty much on the Great Ocean Road, halfway between Torquay, Bells Beach and the 12 Apostles.
Yeah, then that's beautiful. But you're not there anymore. So did you then decide to continue building it up in Bowen Heads, or what happened after that?
I started. Yeah, so I worked and I basically built a business in the countryside in Victoria from nothing. And my biggest competitor were agents who were wondering why they would pay money for something that, in inverted commas, they get for free. And so that was a big struggle, and a lot of education. I also had to bear in mind, I suppose, that I did have a trade that did pay very well that I wasn't doing. And my wife was working very hard as a physio and I was out there being a photographer, not taking a whole lot of photos. So I really had a fear of having to go back to being an electrician. So I pushed and made it work out there. I did the education, I built relationships, and that business grew. But I also got sick of the travel in the end, because they were the wonder years where you used to do your own retouching, your own video editing, if you even shot video, and drew up all your own floor plans when you got home. So you can imagine sort of leaving at 6:30 in the morning to start at 8 in Apollo Bay, shooting till the end of twilight in summer, maybe 9 o'clock, driving another hour and a half home, and then getting to do all your own retouching and draw your own floor plans. And then to leave at 6:30 again, which left you about 4 hours for sleep, which was great for the first year or two. But yeah, in the end, I realised it wasn't sustainable.
I guess at least it made it look like you were working hard. So
Yeah, I do remember the time when the dishes were piling up and it was probably getting close to 2 a.m. and there was a pile of dishes and I went, ugh, not doing them. So I went to bed, got up, and then the first phone call I had with my wife in the morning was she called me lazy for not doing the dishes, which made me feel pretty valued.
So, this isn't the first time I've heard that's obviously hit a very sore point.
I've never forgotten it. It was only, 16 years ago or 15 years ago, and never forgotten it. But no, look, it became obvious I needed to be closer to home. That stretching yourself that far doesn't make a sustainable business. You can build business, but you're far more profitable closer to home. And an opportunity came up for me to buy a franchise that was already running. So effectively a book of relationships. And the price that was being asked was, I thought, pretty reasonable. It was probably higher, more than the business was worth, but I really wanted to be closer to home. And, I'd sort of thought that the reason, because I hadn't been making much money, I'd been turning over a bit, but not making much. I thought, the main reason for that was a lot of this travel business. So I could cut, gain 3 hours a day. Imagine how much money I could make.
I think that's an interesting point because I've had the experience as well when I used to live in Mornington and travel to Phillip Island to work. You feel like you're building the business. There's a temptation to sort of stretch out as much as you can and get as many agencies on board as possible. It's not a sustainable business. You end up, running yourself into the ground, wasting time traveling 2 or 3 hours a day. Whereas if you do focus on your closer area, and you end up in a better position.
Yeah, and so, Barwon Heads was growing at that stage, right? So it was a sleepy town when we moved in. It had the boom after the TV series was shot had sort of started, but it was only just starting to take off. Median house price was probably 500,000, maybe less. So, it wasn't crazy. But I was still probably doing 50% of my work just there, or my income just there where I lived, and then spending the rest, and that was just comparatively a dream, like so easy, when you don't have a 300 kilometre minimum, and that's assuming you don't have another 100 Ks to drive from there, which adds 200 Ks to your day.
So you focused on building up in Barwon Heads. How many jobs did you build up to be doing at that point?
Yeah, I got to the point where I could do 12 a day. So I basically got my jobs down to the minute. So I worked out a time schedule per job, and I could do a job quickly, 45 minutes for a floor plan and 12 photos, and have, 2 minutes to talk to the vendor, 3 minutes to set up, 2 minutes per image, final image, and that would take me to 30 minutes. Then I had, 15 minutes to do the floor plan and say my farewells and go. And, most of the houses back then weren't mega mansions. They were just, pretty, beachy, shacky stuff. So it wasn't too bad to get through a floor plan. But basically then I had a 15-minute buffer where I had to get to my next job, which might have been 5 minutes away in Barwon Heads or Ocean Grove, you had a bit of leeway. But that's what I had to do.
So that's huge volume. And at this stage, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Don't have anyone working with you. You're shooting 12 jobs, 12 floor plans, coming home, doing all of that editing into the night. And you've saved yourself some travel. But, we talk a lot about sustainability. That doesn't sound very sustainable to me.
No.
So what did you do then? Did you find a way at that point to bring people on?
Yeah, so I suppose I got myself into this trap because my dad was a cray fisherman, right? He was a builder before that, and he ended up being a helicopter pilot. Never knew anything about any of these things that he did. He just had a really good work ethic. So he showed me.
Did he tell people that before he took them in a helicopter?
Well, you don't get to be a commercial helicopter pilot without experience, but when he got into it, had no idea, right? So he just showed me, I suppose the lesson I learned from him by osmosis was work hard and it'll work itself out. So I was just like, it wasn't working itself out, but I just had to work harder and harder and harder until I was not actually able to get through my phone past 11 a.m. to see what missed calls I'd had, because I'd had more than, I think your phone had 50 calls in the register, and I would have had more than 50 calls since 11 and the afternoon. And I knew I'd missed something, but I couldn't check. So it was too far down the list. So that was down. That was when I just happened to bump across a competitor. Actually, she was referred to me by a client. She'd been fishing for work. So she sort of came to me and she was looking for work. Her kids had just gone back to school and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I still wasn't making any money really. Like it was.
So why not? Because I mean, anyone listening goes, geez, 12 jobs a day, you'd be making a fortune. When you're coming home at night and Mel's going, you've been out all day, the dishes aren't done, I can see you working your ass off, but, where's my Lamborghini? What do you say?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So there's probably naivety in business, right? So again, I was told from the franchise, the model that wasn't built for the photographer. It wasn't built. The business that we were in was not built with the end business in mind. It was a money-making exercise, but it was structured in such a way that the amount of turnover or gross turnover was given to the franchise. And as it turns out, in reality, that's most of your profit. So you would have to, in today's terms, be running something like a 45% to 50% net just to make a 10% net. And the way that the business was structured was opaque. You couldn't really see that. There would just be this disconnect. And for somebody like me, I mean, I had no experience. I didn't know how to read cash flows and I didn't know, I didn't know how to read a balance sheet. I didn't have any idea really and I didn't have things like Xero. I just had an accountant at the end of the year who said, hey, guess what? You turned over $500,000 and you made 40 grand. And I go, what?
Are those real numbers?
Real numbers.
What I think is really interesting is that you could already sort of see the beginnings of the BWRM idea just from, like you said, you had no experience of the photography, but you made the mistakes that, other people we've seen make. You head for the population where you think the money is, but you end up spending your time traveling and then you realise that's inefficient. You then try and get to the stage where you're dealing with the amount of work that you've got and trying to find where the money is. Then you bring on a competitor, which is, the beginning of the sort of contractor idea. At what point did the spark happen? Was it over time or was it one day you suddenly went, hang on a minute, there's a better way of doing this?
I think it was over time and then there was a spark. So anyone who's starting a business, and we've all been there, you get lost sometimes just busting it, right? And you're just working and you've got no time to take a step back and look.
When you were doing all that work and all that volume and busting your ass, were you thinking, if I can just do this, it'll be better? Did you have that kind of plan or were you literally just trying to get through the day?
Well, no, nothing was written. So it was always like in that 15-minute block between jobs, I'm going, right, I've got to make more money. How am I going to do this? I know, I'll do more shoots. Because at the end of the day, I look at it and go, well, that's the only way to generate income is to do more jobs, right? Now, the reality is that that's not true. You can generate a lot less income, but lower your cost base and you'll make a lot more money at the end of the day. So, but I didn't think about that at the time. So I was just like, more jobs, more jobs, more jobs. Now I was maxed. I was doing a dawn shoot most days at that point, then a twilight shoot at the end of the day. So in summer, that dawn's at 5:30. You know that your end of twilight's at 9:30 and you're producing your stuff. So you've got even less time than I had when I was driving to Apollo Bay. Like it was madness. So I brought on my competitor as a contractor and I'd done the numbers and I was like, right, you're going to make X. There's going to be this much left over for me. Brilliant. And then guess what? I couldn't produce it. There were not enough hours in the day then to turn around the volume of work that we were doing. So I started training retouchers. And so I was like, right, so now we're talking because now I've got this system whereby I can get these shoots done. I can get them to a third party. They can produce them and then I can deliver them in the morning and I don't have to sit up all night. I'll just draw my own floor plans because that's only 3 hours work rather than 6. So that's what I did, right? And I trained one and then I trained a second and then I trained a third retoucher. So I had my own in-house retouching team and it was pretty rudimentary, but that then established, right, if I want consistent results, I need consistent input. So then you've got to train it. So then you've got to really break down what you're doing. So it sort of just flowed naturally, but all with this idea.
Did you put your prices up at this point?
No.
Because you're talking about margins. So like I've got a little balance sheet running in my head, but I'm wondering, if you were already making such a small profit, but now you've got all your time back, you then have to do even more shoots and fill that time. And it's just this incremental battle.
Well, do you know what? I don't think I ever made more than $60,000 a year. And I think the most I turned over is close to 600 under that model. And it speaks to my naivety, really, because I was being told by people that I trusted that, hey, the reason you're not making more money is because now you're paying people to do your retouching. And I was thinking, yeah, sure, but I wasn't making money before I did that. And now, so I'm not, but look, and I felt like I was getting ahead at one stage. I felt like things were rolling in the right direction. And then again, at the end of the year, the accountant said, you didn't make any money, buddy. And I was like, oh, cool. What do I do?
So, Guy, what was then the tipping point where you just, because like you say, it's naivety, but all I'm hearing is, like Dave said, there's a lot of experience where you've actually tried absolutely every avenue I could possibly think of to make that model work. You've realized that it's not a you problem, it's an issue with the model. So then what happens?
So then Nick, who's also a director of BWRM, and I got together. He's an ex-banker and he had experience in understanding business that I didn't have. And we built probably what was an early idea that put a model, basically, that we took to the head of the franchise. And we were told in no uncertain terms that there was no way. We put a lot of work in. We were told that when we raised it as a concern that we were to come up with a solution, not a problem. So we did. We came up with a solution. We flew at our own expense to head office. We presented it and were told, no way. And I realised I had to go. I realised that if there was no understanding of what it took on the ground, then this model wasn't going to work for me. And at the same time, and I can't remember who it was, but there was a bread franchise in the headlines, exactly the same thing happening. And the franchisees were trying to change the model. The franchisor said no, and then the whole thing fell over because they all went out of business. And I could see that I was going to go out of business. So I wanted to make positive change, wasn't able to. So I left. I took the hard decision to leave. And at the core of that was this egalitarian maybe thing, but was like, I have to build something that works for the photographer and then work backwards from there. So if a photographer needs something, I need to find a way to deliver that in a way that is that works in the market, because I know what the market will pay for images. I know what the costs are on the ground. So I have to deliver that, find a way to monetize it so I can scale it effectively. And that was the photographer first idea, which is now the creative first idea, because we recognise that a lot of people who join the business are creatives, not necessarily photographers.
Talk to me a little bit more about photographer first, Guy, because it's something that really is the core of our value proposition. Is it something you keep coming back to? Yeah, when someone says to you, give me an example of photographer first in action.
I think we can demonstrate it. So we know what the business is. All directors do. We all work in the business, right? We all run our businesses through it. We all support our families through this business, right? And we know that it works. We know that photographers need a decent outsourcing process. So we provide that, right? We know that it needs to be consistent. It needs to be scalable for them. So we provide that. We know that there's going to need to be some workflow things there, like software, shooting methods, production methods, a way to get your invoices out to track a huge amount of work, or if that's what you're doing, but any job that you're doing. We know all of this because we need it, because we use it, right? So we've built tools as photographers for photographers, or as creatives or electricians for creatives. So we've built those tools, and that's what it's really about. It's like, we've put the people on the camera at the center and then built a sustainable business around that. And then I think the most important part for me is that, yes, we have an agreement in place, a legal agreement, but what we don't have are any restraints or any lock-in periods. So we can effectively put our money where our mouth is in this respect and say, well, okay, here's all the tools. We know you need them. We know that they work. you can join us. And as part of that, the contractual thing, we need to say, we have to respect our territory, and we have to respect everybody else in the business, and we have to stick to our postcodes. That's basically the strength of the contract. And if it doesn't work for us, or we don't want to do that, we can leave. And that's okay, because that was quite different to the franchise, where you would come in and you would be promised a lot, delivered very little, and at the end of the day, they would use the contract as a dirty great big stick to try to keep you there. So they get you in with a carrot, and then they belt you with the stick at the end of the day. And we've basically just all carrot. So, and that to me is what Photographer First is. So if you don't like it, you can go. And I'm sorry about the shitty metaphor, but that's me, that.
You decided to start this new thing. What made you want to do something at scale with other people rather than just kind of do your own little thing in the bar when you had a good thing going? What made you want to do something bigger? Is there an inherent ambition within you or desire to change the world?
No, look, I think, maybe, but I think for me it was, I knew what I had to build for me, right? And I'd effectively built it. I was just in the wrong model. Now, I left that model. It was a bit of an arduous process. There was other people, in my family who were within that business. There were people that I really respected within that business. But I made that decision thinking about my wife and kids, really, and how I was going to support them. My wife was pregnant with our second child, and I was looking at the end of the financial year going, this is how am I going to do this? I can't keep a roof over their head. So I left for me and them, right? I didn't leave for any other photographers. But then when I left, it worked and it was good. It was great straight away. I could all of a sudden, all the things I was doing made sense and delivered the income that I thought was reasonable for the amount of effort and the amount of turnover.
Are you comfortable saying what sort of percentage increase you saw, or would you prefer not to?
Oh, look, I say it depends on your model, but I had a pretty staff-heavy model then. I've leaned it out over the years. Like, I've refined as I've gone. But then I went from, say, 10% to 40% net. So significant.
And what about the recovery of time?
I was already doing the things. I was just not making any money. So for me, no, like it had been that long that I'd realised the actions or the steps that had to be taken. It didn't change anything in my day-to-day at all, really. I just made a lot more money, and I felt like I could support my family for the first time, properly. But then what happened, the franchise wanted to make an example of me. I was their poster boy, really. I was one of their biggest turnover people. I was the person that they asked to speak at a lot of their conferences and things like that. And they didn't like that I'd left, so they threw the book at me. Then I sort of dug in, I fought it, and I realised there were a lot of photographers in the world who were in a similar situation. And I thought, you know what, I can do this. I can pull out all stops and make something that will benefit all photographers, not just me and my family. And then it became, that's when I started having a conversation with you guys, and I had more of a conversation with Nick. And it certainly wasn't my intention when I left, but it probably took 3 to 6 months of having left, and I realised that there was going to be a demand for this. I wasn't going to be the only person in this situation. In fact, I already knew people who were in the situation that I had been in, and I could see the light. Like, I see the results were there for me and my family.
I remember you talking about I forget the name of the guy, but the surfer who was left in the water to deal
Mick
with the
Fanning.
shock.
Yeah. So after our first year, we had our first conference. So you can correct the dates if you like, because I'm not good at this sort of thing. But I think I was sort of officially started BWRM on January 1, 2016.
Yep.
I think probably by mid-year you guys had all joined. So the first few months of the year I hadn't, it was just me.
I think I was Feb, but I think
me and Jackie were both Feb, and Nick was somewhere around June, July-ish, I think.
It rolled pretty quick, and I think at those times, you're used to running like 12 jobs a day, so time moves quick. Make a decision and you just do it. Yeah, at the end of the year, we had our first conference, and we got together. I think were there 18 of us after 12 months sitting in a room. Feel like that was the right number. You can correct that later in post. um, there were 18 of us, I think, sitting in this room, and I wanted to explain photographer first because it was a concept that came up. And I remember that was the year Mick Fanning was attacked by a shark. And when we say Mick Fanning was attacked by a shark, his surfboard was attacked by a shark. And the cavalry came in. This is at a surfing event in South Africa. And the cavalry came in with the jet skis and whisked him off to safety. And all the headlines were poor old Mick. But I saw a photo and there was a bloody photographer in the water with the shark left behind. And that to me, I mean, that made me cry when I brought that. There was so much emotion in that time, and having left the franchise and built the business that we had and being so positive that was really the analogy that really came home for me. Nobody remembered the photographer, and we were, come hell or high water, that's what we were going to do. We were going to think about photographers. We were going to put them central, and I think we've continued to do it. And yeah, that poor old mate just swam to shore. He survived, as we all seem to. But, yeah, no one really cared.
How did you get from, you've set up your business on your own without, the support that was offered before. That works. How do you go from there to having 4 directors and expand outwards?
I am good at knowing what I'm not good at. And I realised that that if we were going to make something big, that it was going to take more than me. I didn't have the skills that I needed to cover all bases with growing a business. And first and foremost, when I made that decision to grow and bring on photographers and be there for photographers beyond my own business, then I had to make it a success. That was my number one priority. I don't like doing things badly. So I had great connections with people in the business, you guys included. I could see what you could bring to the table. So, I know that, Nick, for example, business banking background, we were going to need somebody. I always called him, the yin to my yang. He is total opposite to me, yet we get on really well. But, if I was to be happy to spend $1, he would ask me why, every time, and it would even just $1. The principle of the matter is it had to be a reason, whereas my personality type would be like, just throw all the resources at it because I've got a gut feel this is going to work. There was obviously a software element, Dave, and that's where I looked at you, for previous experience, why you hadn't been a coder for a long time. You understood systems in the way, and you look at systems in the way that I look at systems. And I think that's probably, my background and your background. There was a similarity there in the environments we were working in. And Jackie, I saw you as another me, which I think you are, and somebody who had a different view on things to me. So I've thought that you're fearless, you'll throw yourself in. I think you've demonstrated that in your own episode on this podcast. But you would also, I would go to a problem, I go, here's the solution. And you go, yeah, but what about this idea? And then we'd look at it from a different angle. And I'd love that. So I thought that I wanted to, and to use our, what terms we know now, 2 yellow personalities, I think is important. If you're building a new business, you need 2 people who are going to really just be unafraid to innovate and grow. And then you need somebody to count the money. And if you're going to be software based, you need somebody who knows how the hell that works. And I tell you what, we would have been broke without Nick, but we also would have been broke without Dave managing what he's managed. And, and Jackie, we wouldn't be where we are without you, and all the work that you've done in brand positioning and all of that stuff early, and then just being a support and throwing that separate opinion or being a sounding board, but always seeing the big vision and helping us drive towards that. So I could see that, and that's what we needed. And I think I'm good at knowing what I don't know. And I'm also good at knowing what we need. I think if I'm going to be good at 2 things, that'd be it. I'm not good at doing the dishes. I still hate doing that. But yeah, so that's why.
Presumably you've outsourced that one.
Yeah, I've got a dishwasher these days.
Living the dream.
Oh yeah, how fancy. Yeah, so that was it really. I mean, the number one consideration was how to make this thing work. And that's why, so not interested in me being the freaking controlling, person. I just wanted the vision to work, then, bring in who needs to be brought in. I'd rather have a smaller share of something amazing than 100% share of something pretty average.
So here you are now today, 7 years later, your business, as your photography business, is now pretty much running smoothly. You've got a business partner. I'm just fast forwarding ahead, guys. So you've got a business partner. You're doing heaps of volume. Every time I ring you, you're off camping or something, or not doing anything, just being lazy, probably not doing the dishes. No, your focus has been working on BWRM, obviously. So how has BWRM and your vision for BWRM changed since 2016, where you're obviously in this fairly fragile headspace after that experience to now obviously in a really positive headspace? Has that changed kind of where you want to drive it?
I think broadly the vision's still the same, but it's just better. I don't like doing things badly. I can't, or I can, and I do, but I like to improve them. So I'm not afraid to jump into something, but I hate being not good at something. And so, or if something's not quite right, I will just keep making it better. And I think that's what we've done, and I can't say it's all me. I think that's what we collectively have done, is just improve and improve and improve and improve what we offer. And I think what we've got now, I have somebody on the ground, a business partner on the ground who does all the client relationship stuff. We have full-time photographers, we have part-time photographers, we have contract photographers. And then all I do is quality assurance, which gives me a good eye every day on what our post-production teams are doing and also what my photography team is doing. So I get this double whammy effect. I obviously use all of our systems and all of our software so I can see every day what's working and what isn't. And then I just work on, with like the rest of us, improving what we're offering to members.
So to compare it to kind of, let's say, I don't know how, like 15 years ago, where you're doing 12 jobs a day, all your own retouching, no sleep, just full on time, to now where you've pretty much got your time back. You've outsourced just about everything except the quality control. Has the income, you talk about like what you learnt with your dad, where the harder you work, the more you're going to make, but it just sounds like smart working now, because if your net's kind of quadrupled, yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of what landed, I think, is that, yes, hard work is very important, but so is smart. So yes, you can be the last person on the building site every day if you really want to, and you will build a business, but you can also be smart about it. And where the business has never been stronger, we've never had more clients, we've never put out a more diverse range of products, we've never been able to charge as much, and I've never had to do as few hours as I do now to keep it running better than it's ever run. And I make more money than I've ever made.
Have you managed to maintain those relationships? Because that's something we've spoken about a lot on this young podcast, is the time it takes to maintain those relationships. But if you're not on the ground as much, how's that going?
Yeah, so I don't do that role anymore. So I've actually purposely transitioned myself away from that role. So Stefan is now, as a business partner, in charge of relationships. I have a beer with clients here and there, and I catch up with them, but I'm not doing that on a regular, quarterly basis. Whereas we've built a program where Stefan knows when he's meeting with these guys and he's meeting consistently, he knows what he's asking, and then we're resolving any issues before they even start. So it's pretty good, it's pretty efficient and well-oiled, and we're on to things straight away. That's not to say I don't talk to agents every single day, because I do, but that's, it's not what I spend my focus on.
Amazing. And now we're almost out of time, but I would like to ask you, where do you see, like we've gone through this whole history, but where do you see BWRM going?
Look, it's hard because it's where do you see the property market going? And I think what people don't understand, and we have a lot of competitors in the market that are big businesses, and what they miss is that when somebody's selling their house, it's actually a really emotional experience for them. There's a lot of time in it. There's a lot of energy expended, and often a lot of emotional energy expended. So we get to people when they're starting or finishing a very stressful period of their life, or they're starting a big change in their life. And for us, a lot of what we do is making that person feel comfortable. And I think until that changes, until, people are taking a snap of their own house and putting it online, I think there'll be a job for us, because people want to be made to feel comfortable. They want to be in good hands, and they're prepared to pay for quality. I mean, they are in all industries in Australia. That is definitely a thing that people will pay for. Obviously, not everyone, not all the time, but I think we can really actively demonstrate to all of our clients what value we add, and I think a lot would have to change. So I think we're here for the long haul, and I think we'll just get more efficient, frankly. That's what I think, and better.
So, Guy, just to finish up, you're obviously in a much better headspace and love what you do. Might be hard to choose, but what's your favourite thing about your business?
I find it really easy, actually. The number one thing that I love is to watch people build their own success, whatever that looks like. So, we have our pathway, which is great, but the reality of that is just people being clear on where they want to go and getting there. And I don't care whether it means they've got a business that's a tenth the size of mine or 10 times the size of mine. If that's where they want to be and that's where they get to, I love it. And I've been on the sales course watching people graduate a number of times, and I've cried every single time. I don't know what it is, but I just love seeing people just owning their situation and getting where they want to get. I just find it so positive, and I feel so privileged to be part of something that can deliver that. So that's what I love.
Yeah.
I'm glad you've brought that up, because I've got a question I wanted to ask you, and now you've started it, I can. Back in 2016, 17 at our first conference, you've been through all of this upheaval, you've been through the lessons learned, you've been through 3 a.m., shifts and drawing floor plans at all hours of the day, of not making any money, of, issues with, working too hard and all that stuff. You finally get to the first BWRM conference. You walk into the room and there's, 10 or 12 people sitting there and waiting for you to talk to them. What's going through your mind?
I remember 18 people, even if there were only 10 or 12.
Yeah.
But look, I think, overridingly was pride, look what we've done. Look what we've achieved in 12 months. Look where we are. Think about where we were a year ago. Look how far ahead every single one of these people in this room is from where they were, and yeah. That coupled with...
It doesn't get old.
Well, that coupled with the stress relief and the story about the photographer in the water, no wonder I cried, it just completely, You actually have to, every single time that nearly happens to me, when I stand up in front of the room, I get a little bit, I just don't cry outwardly anymore, just a little inside happy cry when I see it.
I think that's what makes you good at what you do, is you genuinely care about the people, and that it's the people that make us who we are. What you said about when you watch people's businesses become successful, and it's not just, you're winning something. It's not just a trophy. These are things that are changing people's lives. People are, paying off their mortgages sooner than they were going to pay them off. They're putting their kids through schools do you know what I mean? They're feeding their families when they might not have been able to do so before.
And they're in control of their destiny, and they're making a decision, a positive decision, to do something that they love, and to do something creative, and to actually make an income, and to be your own boss. I mean, there's quite a bit there.
Pretty rare.
That's hard to do. And so to see that happening, I just love it. I just love it.
Yeah. No, it's pretty rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Guy, that's been extremely interesting and informative. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure it's not the last time that we're going to have you on here, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Dave, say thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Dave.